Good morning on a Tuesday, this March 9th. You know, this week we are changing times. We are moving forward an hour. Yes, that means we lose an hour of sleep on Saturday night. So prepare now. Maybe you need an extra nap. Maybe you need a little more downtime. I don't know, but be sure to understand that you're going to lose an hour, and that's going to adjust yourself. And that's going to can be problematic on Sunday morning. I don't want you to miss our 9 o'clock traditional or 11:15 contemporary service. And we have Sunday school at 10 o'clock. And we don't want you to miss any of those that you want to attend. So be sure to move that clock forward an hour as we go to bed Saturday night. Today is Talk It Out Tuesday, and I'm doing this live from the clubhouse of the RV park we're staying in Oklahoma. Quick update for those that have been following. My wife's mother is not doing very well, and so they've kind of called the family up, and we're watching and waiting at this time. And so we'd appreciate the prayers, and we thank you for those that have been praying concerning these days right now. We're not sure what or when, and so thankful to technology. I can do my job from pretty much wherever except on Sunday mornings, and so I'm working remotely this week. Be sure you can call the office and get a hold of Linda or Keith, and you can, if you've got my cell phone or email, you can call me and talk to me as well. I'll be working remotely as I'm here just to be with the family and kind of take care of the family a little bit as well. So that's just a brief update of what's going on in my life. How are y'all doing? How are things going with you on this Tuesday? You know, we've made it a practice over the last several months that Tuesdays are what I call Talk It Out Tuesday. And these are opportunities for you to submit your questions. Sometimes people submit them live, and sometimes they submit them ahead of time. Today, I have a question that was submitted ahead of time and want to share that with you. And I put it in the title when I'm talking about, is cremation okay for Christians to do? Now, there have been a lot of differing opinions on this over the years. For a multitude of years, first of all, I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do. What I want to do is share with you a biblical, theological, spiritual perspective on burial and or cremation. And you're really going to find differences of opinion today. For instance, Russell Moore of the Religious Ethics and Liberty Commission, Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, other Southern Baptist Convention is against cremation. BillyGraham.com and they, shows a little more leniency with that. You have other religions that aren't sharing necessarily a problem with it. But I do think that there are some questions that any family member or any family that's dealing with this decision, you should at least ask yourself a few questions. And so we're going to get to those. The overwhelming biblical evidence is burial. However, there is no condemnation for cremation. And so what you see is cremation was not the normal practice of the Hebrew people. You see Abraham buying the cave for Sarah, and he would be buried there. You've got Jacob telling Joseph, hey, take me back, and I want to be buried. Joseph saying, take me back. And, while the Egyptians would have embalmed you, Hebrews don't embalm you. And so even there you have some differences of practice and opinion on what you can and can't do. Oh, well, we're not going to do what the Egyptians do. That's a pagan religion. But we embalm every day. If you're going to be buried, you're embalmed. And so, I think that we have to take these things a little lighter and not get caught up in everything being a war, everything being this cultural battle that we've got to face. I don't know that everything is a cultural battle to face. I think sometimes we make cultural battles up just because we want to fight. And that's an unbiblical and unchristian thing. I mean, our job is not to fight. We love God, love people, but we fight all the time. And we don't reconcile. But when it comes to burial and cremation, the evidence of the Bible would suggest burial, simply because that's what you see over and over and over and over again. There were extreme circumstances. Saul and Jonathan were beheaded by the Philistines, and so they took their bodies back and burned them. Not the Philistines. The Hebrew people took Saul and Jonathan's body, and they cremated them. They burned them. That wasn't necessarily a disrespectful thing. That was an anomaly. As I said, the overwhelming biblical evidence is for burial. The overwhelming Christian experience for hundreds and thousands of years now has been burial. When you think of a funeral service, you think of a casket, you think of an open casket, a viewing, closing the casket, having a service, going to the graveside, and having a moment there, and then the lowering of the body into the earth. That's what, when you think of a funeral service, this is what you consider, this is what you think of. But does that make it unbiblical to cremate? Does it make it immoral or unethical for cremation? And this is the question that many are asking today. And so I think that we need to look at what is, first of all, what's the intent? You know, the idea of burying a body, you could even argue stems, obviously prior to Jesus and prior to the New Testament. However, the metaphor that is used in the New Testament is to be asleep. And to be asleep, why? Because at some point you're going to be resurrected when Jesus comes back and you get to the end of time and all of the things that go on there. We're not going to argue about what happens when in the timeline. There's 1,000 different theories and beliefs out there. We'll all figure it out when it happens. But what the Bible does say is that there will be a resurrection of the dead. And it is thought and theorized that the best way to honor that metaphor, the best way to honor that moment is for burial, because you have a body. But here's the problem that I find. If you were to, quote unquote, resurrect a casket from the 1800s, let alone the 300, 400, 500s, if you were to resurrect a casket from the 1900s, there is going to be decay. The Bible also says that dust to dust, ashes to ashes, from dust you came, and to dust you shall return. And so there is a decay. David would say that we're basically food for worms. And while that is gross and that feels disrespectful, the thing is, we're a carbon-based life system. And we're going to go back to a natural state, if you will. We're going to go back to a decayed, broken down situation. And so cremation is just the hastening of that prior to what would have happened automatically over the course of time anyway. One argument that might be for burial concerns this idea of resurrection. Well, God is going to resurrect. Yes. Well, an argument for cremation is God can resurrect anything, anytime, anywhere that he chooses. Our God is big enough to handle that moment. Our God's big enough that you can be scattered over the face of the earth, and God is still going to resurrect you, and he can do what he chooses, and he has the power to do that. What I find most people's adverse reaction to cremation centers around is this. For some, it feels disrespectful to burn the body, that there is no place for you to go back to honor or to respect or to remember or to think about the dead. And I think that while that may be true, There are those that after cremation, they have the urn and they keep the urn. The cremains are in an urn. Any funeral director that would do this, you get an urn in the process. The reason many people have been choosing cremation over these last, and it's doubled in the last 15 years. The reason most of the time is a financial situation. And an average funeral can cost $10,000 to $12,000. An average cremation process is $1,500 to $2,500. That's one report that I read. I don't know the specifics, but most people that are choosing cremation are choosing it for a financial reason, and for some that is a problem. For some that want to think theological about this and some that don't want to think practical, view that as a cheap way to disperse and dispense of our dead. And so I always come back to, what is your intent? Why cremate versus bury? Now, I think that there's a very real moment here. It's expensive. And if you and your family have not made the proper preparations for that, if you haven't bought a burial plot or a burial plan, if you haven't gone to your local funeral director and discussed these things and put a plan in process that can be prepaid for, that's a big chunk of money. And a lot of people are not prepared for that. A lot of people are not prepared for that kind of expense, and we panic. And it's understandable. You're in a grief moment. You're in a difficult moment. What are we going to do? How are we going to pay for that? The estate doesn't have that, and I don't understand how. And so the funeral director, trying to be helpful, will give these options. I don't think there's any problem with it. Now, we need to realize that there will be some that will feel that that's disrespectful. What I want to caution people from is this. I want to caution people from saying it's unbiblical, because you can't prove that. Yes, there is evidence of burial. Yes, there's a metaphor of going to sleep. And cremation would seem to suggest that you are disrespecting or disregarding, at least disregarding the metaphor of sleep, and that you, by burning the body and creating the ashes, are just disregarding all things Christian. And again, I think it comes back to your intent. And I also think it comes back to your personal situation. Let's be honest. Not everybody has the ability to pay. Not everybody has that opportunity to do so. And there are some financial reasons why somebody may choose this and still be honoring and respecting the individual. I think you can bury them dishonorably and you can cremate dishonorably. In the same way, I think you can bury somebody honorably and you can cremate somebody honorably. It comes back to what is your motivation for doing it. Secondly, another question I think you need to take in consideration is, what was the desire of the deceased? Did they have a thought about this? Was there a discussion about this? Was there anything that you talked about prior to this? And if they had wishes, I think it honors them and it's respectful for you to honor their wishes. And let's hope that they prepared for those wishes as well. Something else that I think we need to think about, this idea of cremation being awful. I think a lot of it just has to do with, it feels a little unnerving for it to go on. I don't have a problem with it. Personally, I don't have a problem. I love Keith Warren's idea, freeze dry me and make a tree. And that's a thing. That is a thing. You can actually take the remains and create life in a tree from that. And I think that's a wonderful way to be honored and remembered. And I think that that is certainly something to take into consideration. I love that idea. I'm going to look into that idea further. I've looked into it before. I know it's available, and we'll be looking into that as well. But on the idea of, can a Christian cremate morally, ethically, spiritually, theologically, and be okay? Yes, cremation is not a sin in my opinion. Creation is not a biblical sin from that perspective either. It is not common. It's much more common today than it was. So many of our listeners may have grown up in a day and a time where it was considered taboo, and that it wasn't something that, a good Christian family ought to do. Here's a couple of more considerations before we close this topic. I think that you need to take in consideration the grieving process. Now, on the one hand, somebody would say, well, if you're worried about somebody, having the urn in the house, and never moving forward in the grief process, the same could be said about a tombstone. Well, here's the difference. Somebody that has an urn of the remains of the deceased in the home really does not allow themselves to move forward. I mean, how awkward would it be if John had his beloved Susie's remains in an urn above the fireplace, but John decides to start dating Sue? Well, now we've got a problem. That's going to be a difficulty, isn't it? It's going to be a complication, because Sue's going to be like, why do we have Linda still in the house? And so it can create a complication and a problem. Secondly, John may not ever move forward because every time he walks by, he sees Linda. Every time he walks by, well, he's just honoring her. He's just that is absolutely right. But there can be an unhealthy way to do that. And by holding on, this is why I personally don't like having funeral services recorded, because I don't think it lets the grieving family move forward in the process that they need to. Because I know many will come back and watch it and watch it and watch it, and they don't release themselves to move through the grieving process. The same can be said for an urn. That's not true for everybody, but it could be. And at least if you have to get dressed, get in the car, drive to the cemetery to pay your respects and honor your deceased loved one at the tomb, at the tombstone, then that you at least have to make a conscious effort to go do it. It's not just in the walk of your morning. It's not in the walk of your day. It's not you standing in your robe with your cup of coffee and talking to Linda on top of the hearth. We must allow ourselves to grieve. And if you don't allow yourself to grieve, you will hamper yourself, and you're going to harm yourself over the course of time. So burial at least allows what feels like a moment of closure. But I would say to you, as a pastor, as a preacher of funerals, the same can be done in a memorial service with the remains of the individual in an urn. You can still have a memorial service. You can still have a closing kind of service, a recognition of his life or her life, a recognition of the love that is there, a celebration of that life. It can still go on and be recognized, and it is an appropriate way. So you need to consider the intent that you have. You need to consider the feelings and wishes of the individual. You need to consider the social mores where you live. Maybe cremation where you live is taboo, and it is something that's going to be looked upon unfavorably, and your Christian witness then could be lessened, and you have to take that into consideration. One of the things that Russell Moore brings up, and somewhat unfairly, I think, is he lays the guilt on us as Christians. Well, what does cremation say about our belief? Well, cremation to me says my belief is I respect the dead, I respect the power of God, and you know what? This body really is just a shell. Who I am is inside this body. My soul is the only thing immortal about this. Now, wait a minute. You're going to be, no. If you read through the end times, yes, there is a resurrection of the dead to stand in front of God. And then you will go to the second death in hell, or you get a new, glorified, perfected body to enter into heaven. So this shell and this body I have is not what is immortal. The soul of an individual is immortal, and burial or cremation does not change that. So anyway, just need to take into consideration a few thoughts and feelings about the issues at hand. Cremation is okay for the Christian to do. Cremation is not unbiblical. Cremation is something that is allowable. Cremation is something that needs to be taken with respect, and you need to continue, as long as we respect God, respect the individual, respect the process, and our intent is pure and loving, I don't have a problem with it. I hope that helps answer your question on burial or cremation. It is a personal choice. You guys have a great day today. Tomorrow is Whiteboard Wednesday, and obviously, as you look behind me, I do not have a whiteboard. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I may not have a Whiteboard Wednesday. It's going to somewhat be determined about the course of events today and tomorrow. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen yet, but if I'm here, and I'd love to see all of you. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.